Should you convert $2 million to a Roth IRA all in 1 year? Not because you have to, not because of a mistake, but on purpose. And it's something many of my clients actually ask. Should I just rip off the Band-Aid now and be done with it?
Do it like a Band-Aid, one motion, right off!
And it might sound extreme, even reckless to some people, but when we break it down together today, you might walk away with a very different view of Roth conversions in general. So let's look at what happened when one of my clients, we'll call him David, asked about this exact situation, and more importantly, whether it could make sense for you. So let me introduce you to David and Sally. David is 60, married, and recently retired. He has about $2 million in taxable brokerage account and another $2 million in a traditional IRA. No pension, no other earned income. Social Security is just a few years away at about $4,000 per month, and then Sally gets half of that as a spousal benefit. Now, David lives on about $120,000 per year, mostly from that taxable account. And we're also going to assume about a 5.5% long-term rate of return just for modeling today. But here's what makes David's situation unique, and that is his kids. All high-income professionals, doctors, attorneys, engineers, and they're likely to be in high tax brackets for the next 30 plus years, which will be really important as we talk about this decision later in the video. But David had a bold question. What if I just convert all $2 million of my IRA to Roth this year? Just one and done. Now, if you're watching this and you have about $2 million in a tax-deferred account, there's likely going to be in a future where you'll have very large required minimum distributions. Now, if we don't do conversions and we start to project this income out, having RMDs will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars if we did nothing, based on these pink sections right here, what you're looking at on my screen. So we really need to think about how do we start tax planning now, earlier on in retirement, and what sort of tax planning moves can we make now while he retired early? If you're staring down at a similar balance and wondering what your future RMD situation might look like, this is the type of thing we do every day with clients. So if that's something you're looking for, click the link in the description to see if we're a good fit to help. But as you're watching this, you might be asking yourself, why not just convert a little bit each year? Maybe less, like 500,000 or $1 million instead of all 2 million. Why do the full thing and get hit with a big tax bomb? And you would be right, converting and spreading taxes out over several years, particularly in this situation targeting the 24% bracket, was optimal on paper. But this is the type of decision that isn't always a math decision. And it's just as equally an art decision. But if finances were just purely mathematical, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And for David, his thought was to look at ways to eliminate some of that tax uncertainty in his life. He just wants to know what I owe, pay it, and never think about it again. And to be clear, this mindset goes against what most people are taught. But Roth conversions, especially big ones, are just as much psychological as they are mathematical. I like to relate it to paying off a 2% mortgage when you can earn 4 to 5% just on risk-free treasuries. In a spreadsheet, it might not be optimal, but for some people, owning their home outright feels worth it. For David, this was about owning his income plan for the next 30 years and handing his kids a tax-free legacy. So that's all theory, that's all the psychology behind this, but just because it makes you feel good does not mean it's good for you. For some people have no investments at all. For example, some people feel like having all their money in the bank and not having any investments at all, and that feels great, but doesn't mean it's prudent. So before we talk about whether this is a genius move or mistake, let's get practical. What actually happens for someone like David when you pull the trigger on a $2 million Roth conversion in 1 year? So when we model this out, you can see here, this is a snapshot of 2025 tax projections. If we zoom in here, you can see this is the $2 million Roth conversion. We can see that we fill up the top tax bracket, but we're also looking at different types of taxes. For 2025, we're looking at a total federal income tax about $655,000, long-term capital gain tax of a little under $13,000, because remember, we're still creating income from his taxable brokerage account. We have to factor that in as well. He's got net investment income tax. This is the additional tax you pay when your income is above a certain threshold. It's about 3.8% tax. And then, of course, one we can't forget, which is state tax. Because he lives in the state of Massachusetts, that's over 6 figures just in state taxes. So grand total, over $770,000 in taxes all in 1 year. Now, for me and many of you watching this, it sounds kind of like a gut punch, and it's what it's supposed to feel like. So by paying those taxes now, what David's approach is thinking through, hey, I don't have to worry about RMDs over my lifetime. My future taxable income is going to plummet, allowing for more tax efficient Social Security, avoiding IRMA surcharges on your Medicare in retirement, and maybe, probably most importantly for him, that his heirs now get to inherit a tax-free Roth instead of a tax burden IRA. Remember, under the Secure Act, they only get 10 years to drain that account. If they're already in a high tax bracket, that's a serious hit for them. But with a Roth, they have 10 years of tax-free growth and withdrawals instead. So here's the $2 million question. Was David's move brilliant or was it reckless? On paper, again, if we run the numbers with smaller, more gradual conversions, he could save a little bit more in taxes. The reality is if you own a pre-tax account, taxes aren't optional. The only question is when and how much and at what rate you pay taxes on those distributions. David's logic was simple. He didn't want to guess. He didn't want to wait. He wanted to own the tax bill now while rates are still historically low. And yes, it's true. The 37% federal bracket is high by today's standards, but it's low historically. In fact, in the 60s and 70s, the top rates were upwards of 70+%. What we also did was we ran, hey, when would I break even? I know I'm paying a lot of tax up front. At what point would he start to come ahead mathematically? Now, if David had stuck with the taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free conventional approach, kicking the can down the road and avoiding RMDs, it would have taken over 23 years to catch up with doing this upfront Roth conversion strategy. And that assumes stable tax law, identify the same market performance in a 30-year plus retirement. Now you might be thinking, what if future tax rates stay low or even drop? And that is certainly a possibility. And for someone considering a 7-figure conversion, what you're doing essentially is you're trying to buy tax insurance. But what was interesting was that for him, his idea wasn't really about breaking even, but more about breaking free from RMDs, from stressing about taxes every year, free from the government potentially raising tax rates throughout his retirement. He hated the idea of debt and wanted to pay off his mortgage, if you will, is what he called it, to the IRS. Now, only in hindsight will we know if this would be a great decision. If you just tell me what the future tax rates are going to be, what future investment rates of return will be, and when your birth certificate expires, then that decision is going to be completely easy. Only time will tell, but either way, his plan really looked good whether he did this massive Roth conversion or not. For him, it was more of a question of optimization versus if it would be a massive mistake. So if you're watching, this big question is probably, would this kind of conversion make sense for me? The reality is that not everyone has the right financial or emotional profile for it. And I love running scenarios like this with clients. We model them all the time, but just because it's possible doesn't mean it's prudent. But here are a few factors we consider when evaluating large Roth conversions similar to this one. Number one, are you in the tax planning valley? Now, this is the sweet spot where you're retired, you're not yet on Social Security, and RMDs are many years away. Of course, if you're on marketplace insurance, you have to evaluate the impact of conversion compared to any sort of subsidies you might be eligible for. During this time, your income may be artificially low compared to your working income, and that creates a short-term opportunity to start converting some money at more favorable tax rates. Obviously, $2 million would push you into the highest tax rate, but you can still target quite large Roth conversions and still be well within the 24 or 32% tax bracket. But here's what I always remind people, and it's really important, and that is not to let the tax tail wag the dog. Yes, taxes matter, but they're just one piece to your overall financial plan. If the pursuit of the perfect strategy adds stress, delays your ability to travel, or forces you to wait too long to enjoy retirement, it's probably not worth it. But if you run the scenarios and it makes sense and allows you to make the most out of life, you have a significant pre-tax balance, you may be the type of person that may want to explore a larger Roth conversion. Number two, you're the type of person that knows how to pay the taxes. This one is critical, and in theory, people hear about Roth conversions, but how do you actually pay the tax on a conversion, because it can be pretty nuanced. If you're converting a large IRA, the most tax efficient option is to pay the taxes from outside assets, typically from a brokerage account or some of your cash reserves. Now, that might not be possible for a lot of people doing these conversions. The other option is using the funds from the IRA itself to cover the tax bill via withholding. But when you do that, you start to reduce the amount that actually goes into the Roth, and possibly for some of you, if you're under 59.5, you trigger a 10% penalty. Paying the tax with the IRA in many cases can still be worth it, But if you are under 59.5, the penalty often makes it a bad deal. So before you convert, make sure you understand not just how much tax you'll owe, but where those dollars are coming from. The third one, and I think this is a really important one, is are you planning to move states? Now this might sound obvious, but sometimes people miss it and it can have a huge financial impact. If you live in a high tax state like mine here in California or New York and plan to retire in a state with no income tax like Florida, Texas, or Nevada, the timing of this Roth conversion makes a really big difference. Now, a conversion for David would mean a 6-figure state tax bill. Now, he had no plan to move states, but this could be a bill that's avoided if you're the type of person that you might be changing residency when you do retire. Sometimes the best move is simply delaying the conversion until after you move. This is a really important factor that not a lot of people talk about when it comes to Roth conversions. And the third factor is legacy. What do you want to leave behind? Now, this might be the most overlooked factor, which is your legacy goals. If your kids are in a high tax bracket, and some clients I work with, their kids are doctors, lawyers, they're going to pay heavily on any sort of inherited IRA, any inherited 401k. Because like we talked about, under the Secure Act, they have 10 years to empty those accounts. And if they're in that 35 to 40% tax bracket, a significant chunk of your hard-earned savings will be lost to taxes. But Roth IRAs, Roths come out tax-free, they grow tax-free and give your heirs flexibility over that 10-year window with tax-free withdrawals. On the flip side, if your heirs are in a low tax bracket, your plan is to give most of it to charity. Roth conversions, especially significantly large ones, may not be the right move for you. This obviously is a very nuanced decision, but if you're thinking of running a big Roth conversion, you want to weigh your options with the actual numbers, some of the financials, the non-financials for yourself or with your financial planner. So finally, let me be crystal clear. This strategy is not for everyone and can be very controversial to do something this bold. But it's a very interesting thought exercise where science starts to meet art. And we all really have about 3 options when we get to retirement when it comes to Roth conversions. The first path is you just do nothing. You keep deferring taxes. For those of you that have large balances, RMDs may hit you later pretty hard and you just deal with it, or your heirs pay the taxes as well. The second path is you convert gradually, right? We spread out the tax and target what might be the most optimal sweet spot for you at a much slower and measured approach. And then of course, the third option, the one we talked about today, is to convert it all now, right? You have a bigger tax bill up front, but the rest of your retirement tax picture might become a lot simpler. So no, this video isn't a recommendation to do a $2 million Roth conversion. I just want to share with you what his idea was based on a few very specific factors, his age, spending level, and his conviction about taxes. But even if you never do a $2 million Roth conversion, understanding why someone else did it can help you think more clearly about your own strategy. So let me know, would you ever consider a big Roth conversion, or does this feel like something that would be totally off the table? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to understand everything you need to know about Roth conversions, how to do it optimally, how I think about it for my clients, one that's maybe a little bit less about ripping off the Band-Aid, check this video right here to watch. Appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you guys on the next one.